Welcome to the lecture series of Public Theology, a cooperation of the Berlin Institute for Public Theology, the Bayersnau D Center for Public Theology, and the Lutheran World Federation.
Hello everyone, I am Lap Yan Kong, teaching public theology and Christian ethics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is part of China, is in Asia, and I hope that you can find where Hong Kong is from the world map. The lecture today, I will be talking about religious leaders, public appearance, and leadership. Most of the time in a society, especially during some kind of political crisis, people are always asking where the church is, where God is. And in fact, Christians are always expecting that religious leaders can say something in a political crisis. So today's lecture, we will be focusing on the role of religious leaders in a public setting. Now I have prepared the PowerPoint so that we can follow the screen when I'm talking about the religious leaders, the public appearance, and the leadership. I'm hoping the lecture will achieve three outcomes. First of all, I will talk about the religious leaders as agents of social transformations in terms of being a conscience of society and enhancing social capital. Second, I will try to correlate Christian concept of conversion and ecumenism with the public role of religious leaders. Finally, I will talk about to recognize and reflect critically the partnership of laity and people with religious leaders. First of all, I will say that the public role of religious leaders is to being a conscience of society. According to Buddhist understanding, the word Buddha means enlightened. So this is the Asian, especially those are coming from the East and South of Asian experience of Buddhism. We Christians do not have the concept or theological concept of enlightened. But I find that the Christian idea of conversion has a very close similar meaning with the idea of enlightened. When I talk about conversion, it is not just only talking about a change of one's faith from atheist to Christian or from Buddhist to Christian, but rather it's a change of one horizon. According to a Jesuit, Bernard Nonigan, he explained that there are three dimensions when we are talking about conversion. The first dimension is talking about the intellectual conversion. It moves from the world of immediacy to the world as mediated by meaning. Put differently, intellectual conversion is about someone or about the experience of encountering truth and willing to surrender oneself to the truth. That is what we are talking about, intellectual conversion. The moral conversion is about the radical change of my criteria for decision making from satisfactions to values. So the moral conversion here is not just talking about from imperfection to moral perfection, but regarding someone who uphold the values of truth, love, justice, instead of some kind of values for our own benefit. And the final meaning of conversion is the religious conversion. So the religious conversion here is being grasped by ultimate concern. So it is more than a conversion to Christian, but the one who is occupied or engaged by the ultimate concern representing love and justice. So when we are talking about the conversion and the idea of enlightenment, so this is exactly what our society needs. And I consider that the religious leaders have a very special role in arising the conscience of society, because religious leaders are someone representing the conscience of society. I just note some of the examples here. For instance, Oscar Romero, he was the Archbishop of San Salvador during the time in late 1970s. He was regarded as the voice of the voiceless. And finally, he was killed by the government army. So when the people said Oscar Romero was the voice of the voiceless, that is what we understand the meaning of conscience of society. And the second one is Dorothy Day. She was a laity. She worked for the poor. She did not hold a high position in the church, but she worked for the poor bit by bit and create a community living for the poor. So she made an impact on society. That is the meaning of being a conscious of society. And the final one is J.B. Sin. He was the Archbishop of Manila in the Philippines in 1980s. He was very outspoken to the military government, even though they were facing different kind of threats coming from the government, from the military, but he was the one speak for the poor and also encourage the people to come out to say no to the dictatorship. So these are the examples of the conscience of society. Now, when we are talking about the conscience of society, I have several things in my mind. First, people are conscientized and they are aware of social injustice and willing to take up their own responsibility. Religious leaders are not the one to force the people to be socially or politically engaged, but the religious leaders are the one to bring people to be conscientized. They know that they are oppressed, and also they have the courage to stand up, to speak out. So this is what I mean by conscientization. And the second thing is that religious leaders are the one to pursue the truth and live in the truth so that the lies have no room in the society. So in other words, being a conscious of society is the one who is committed to the truth and willing to speak the truth and to live in the truth. So this is what I say the religious leader has a role of being a conscience of society. And finally, being a conscience of society is not only a person who confronts the liars and the liars, but the one who witness to the values of truth, freedom, and fraternity. So these are the examples that we can find in some of the virtues of the religious leaders. Now, the second point that I would like to share when we are talking about the role of religious leader in public sphere is the idea of social capital. A social capital is about networks together with shared norms, values, understanding that facilitate cooperation within and among groups. In short, social capital is about trust, about cooperation. It is impossible for a community or a society without trust and cooperation. For instance, like some people in some countries, when they do not have trust in the government, you can see that they will they will have different kind of conflict. They would not put their money into the bank. They just create a lot of chaos because there is no trust. So trust is so basic for a community to go on. But when we are talking about the social capital here, we have to pay attention on three concepts or three components here. The first one is talking about the bonding. Bonding is talking about a kind of shared common identity. For instance, like in the church, we call one another as brothers and sisters because we share a common identity. That is, we are saved by Jesus Christ and we are worshiping the Trinitarian God. Apart from bonding, we also need to have some kind of bridging in order that we are not an exclusive community. We are not a ghetto. We need to go beyond ourselves to bridge with others, to cooperate with people that they are not necessarily Christian. So that's what we call bridging. It's so important here. But we also need a third component, that is, I call here linking. Because bridging may be the groups or the people that we have common concern. Okay, but the word linkage is go beyond the common interest, especially going beyond our social status, our economic status. For instance, like the linkage is talking about a kind of cooperation or relationship between the middle class and the poor. So that is what we call social capital. So that is to say, social capital is a kind of trust and cooperation among people within a community that can go beyond economic, social, religious, and ethnic status here. In theologically, I would consider that social capital is something related to the theological concept of ecumenism. Ecumenism is about the unity of the church. Unity is understood in the idea and practice of koinonia, carrying the meaning of sharing, participation, and community. The call to the unity of the church is not an end in itself. It is to manifest the future fellowship of the kingdom of God, which is to include all humankind, a renewed humankind that has passed through the judgment of God. Wolfhard Pannenberg wrote, "The Christian ecumenical movement cannot accomplish this mission without at the same time creating a model for the compatibility of unity and multiplicity in relation to other religions and in the political world as well." So when we are talking about ecumenism, it is exactly about the idea of social capital. So when we are talking about the unity, it is not just only the unity of the church, but the unity of the humankind as well as all creation. So in other words, that ecumenical spirit is something that can go beyond the church and creating a kind of trust and cooperation among people. So this is why I said social capital cannot be found in the Bible, but the ecumenical spirit share a lot about the concern of social capital. So when we are talking about the role of the religious leaders, I would say that one of the important roles of religious leader is to remind the church that we are called to live in the ecumenical spirit. It is the task of the religious leader always challenging the churches to go beyond itself, okay, to be more inclusive, to be more cooperative with people of other churches as well as other faith. But at the same time, it is also the responsibility of the religious leader to remind our society, no matter whether it is a Christian or not a Christian one. That is to say, they have also to go beyond themselves, not just looking at the national interest, but also the common good of the whole universe. So a kind of restricted patriotism, a kind of narrow nationalism is something against the ecumenical spirit of the churches. So the churches and the religious leader have a very important role to remind what the exclusive mentality of the churches as well as the exclusive mentality of a country. And at the same time, religious leaders are always engaging or participating in forming ecumenical bodies. So it is a kind of witness to a kind of ecumenical spirit as well as what I said, the social capital. Something like the LWF, the WCC, and the Christian Conference of Asia. And apart from all this, religious leaders are also someone starting up projects working for a humane and reconciling society. So the religious leaders are not only the one working within the church setting, but because of the ecumenical spirit, they can bring people from different faiths or different professionals working for the unity of the people in their country. So that's why I said they are also the one who have the capacity to start up different kind of projects that I'm sure that you can find in your context. And the third one is the religious leaders have a responsibility to build trust and friendship among people. Well, I'm not saying that religious leaders are always successful to bring reconciliation to society. but they are the one who are called to bring reconciliation to society. And also because people have trust on them. Surely, religious leaders have to show to the people that they are trustworthy in order that they can be trusted. Finally, I would say something about the partnership here. Even though I have said something very positive role of the religious leader in the public sphere, I'm also aware of the temptation that religious leaders are facing in their office. For instance, most of the government always try to absorb religious leader into their political domain in order that they can get the legitimacy from the religious leader. So that is the first temptation. And the second temptation is that the religious leaders are always more inclined to political conservatism. Well, apart from the theological, standpoint, maybe some of the religious leaders are very concerned about the future of the churches. They do not want to confront with the government, or they do not want to confront with those who are power in order that the churches can survive. And this sometimes make the religious leader become more inclined to political conservatism. And the third thing is that maybe some of the religious leaders, they are very weak of social analysis and political judgment. And sometimes they are not able to make an appropriate and wise political judgment. So this is why the role of the laity is so important here. The first role of the laity is to educate our religious leader. What the laity can educate the religious leader are not biblical knowledge, but rather to bring the religious leaders down to the earth to experience the everyday life of the people. Because religious leaders may spend too much time in the office and sometimes fail to have the first-hand experience and encounter with the everyday life of the people. So that's why what I say is so important for the laity to educate the religious leader. Apart from education, the laity also have a responsibility to challenge the religious leader and to call them back to be faithful to God's mission. As I said, religious leaders are more inclined to political conservatism. Sometimes they are afraid of damaging the church, but the laity has to show the courage to the religious leaders that what we are concerning is not just only about the survival of the churches, but about justice, but about peace. So if we pass this kind of messages to the religious leaders, we can encourage them to make a decision more faithful to God's mission instead of just keeping the church running. On the other hand, religious leaders should also have the courage and ecumenical mindset to encourage and to protect the laity movement, especially those working for social justice and human rights. We all know that religious leaders may not be available to all issues related to social justice. Some of the works should be done by the laity. And that is why I would say that the religious leader should encourage the laity to do God's mission and also to protect them when they are attacked by the government or by others. So these are the roles of the religious leader can perform in the public sphere. Finally, I hope this lecture can give you some ideas to consider that religious leaders are not only the one who defend the orthodoxy of the church, but the religious leader are the agents of social transformation in terms of being a conscience of society and enhancing social capital. Well, I'm not exaggerating the role of the religious leader can play, but we should not neglect or ignore the role of religious leader in social transformation. Secondly, I hope that my lecture would not give you an impression that we have to politicize the role of religious leader, but rather the Christian concept of conversion and ecumenism always have socio-political implication and significance. They are religious concepts, but they are not confined to religious sphere. It always has socio-political implication and significance because God is the creator and savior of the whole world. And finally, I would encourage the role of laity. The role of laity, we are not the sheep listening to the voices of religious leaders, but we are in partnership with religious leaders, helping one another to fulfill God's mission in our context. I think this is so important. Without the support of laity, religious leaders cannot function well. Without the engagement or social engagement of religious leaders, the laity would not be able to fully understand God's mission in our context. So the religious leaders and the laity, they work hand in hand and to bring the common good into realization. So this is the end of the lecture. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you can find more about the role of religious leaders in public sphere through the ongoing discussion and reading. Thank you very much.